Training camp has begun. I'll let you know some things to look out for next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. The hockey season is in full swing here, and I would love to talk hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show notes for more details. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That is JASE medical.com. In today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the goalie depth chart. A lot of things have changed. We know that Fucale went over to the KHL and that Hunter Shepard is the number one goalie in Hershey. But how does the chart flow from there? We'll talk about that in the show. A little bit later, we will talk about how Martin Fehervary is looking forward to playing a season with a new contract behind him and also playing injury-free. But just to get it going here, we will talk about what to look for at training camp as I record this at 8:27 local on Thursday. Training camp is in full session. And from the video footage there, I see Protas and Phillips. They are involved in a skating test there. And what it appears, according to Sammy Silver here, it's just a skate test. But Anthony Mantha finished at the front of the pack with that first group. I also saw video footage of Alex Ovechkin out on the ice. It's always a good harbinger of the Capitals hockey season when you see the great eight out on the group. The first group is Ovechkin, Backstrom, Carlson, Mantha, and Dowd. Alexi Protas' number change is official, now wearing number 21. If we think about a lot of the big Capitals that have wore the number 21 over time. But then there were some things that we knew as well as Max Pacioretty will not be at camp due to a doctor's appointment. So that's one of the things for me to look for just right off the top here is Max Pacioretty. And I know he's not going to be in camp, but that is one of the things to follow this season is that 6 times in his career, he has scored 30 goals. You know, an Achilles issue is an interesting one. If you watch the football season here, you saw what happened to Rodgers, season ending. And then you take a look at other football players out there. Shaq Barrett, if you're familiar with the NFL and the Buccaneers, he came back and has actually played well. So it's kind of a mixed bag as far as how you come back with an Achilles issue. One of the causes for concern, I guess I would say, about Max Pacioretty is it happened to him 2 years in a row. And ultimately, that is why the Capitals were able to afford him at $2 million plus $2 million more with incentives, is because they know that he had those Achilles issues. Let's face it, a guy that has scored 30 goals 6 times in his career would be outside the Capitals budget. That is a storyline to follow. We're really pulling for him at the end of the day, but just taking a look at other things to take a look at as well is Alex Ovechkin as he continues his pursuit of Wayne Gretzky's goal chase there. Can he stay healthy? That is the biggest thing. We know that he dealt with the death of his father last year. We know that he dealt with some injury last year. Nothing is going to derail his progress more than anything than being injured. And I know that oftentimes those are things outside of your control. I mean, sometimes it plays a role in it, but that is one of the things that I would definitely keep an eye on. Another thing to take a look forward here as well is just taking a look at the different players that can stay healthy on this. And this is going to be kind of the topic of this first segment. Is we know that injury played a huge role on this team. Some would say, and I would say, that the Capitals would have made it to the playoffs if they had Wilson, Carlson, and Backstrom in there all season. So Backstrom, this is a big, probably I would say the biggest moment for his career in quite some time. Is what kind of Nick Backstrom do we see in training camp? I know that he had the hip resurfacing procedure done because he couldn't play with his kids. How is he going to do in camp? We heard that he's put the work in over in Sweden. He was also playing hockey over there at a high level as well. How is that going to translate to the ice when he is playing at MedStar Ice Complex? And will the Capitals be able to offer up that tough love if he is not quite where he needs to be? Because let's face it, this Capitals team is up against the cap, and they are paying him a boatload of money not to be playing injured. So those are one of the big things, I guess I would say, is to look forward is what kind of condition Backstrom is in. Of course, one of the things is Anthony Mantha, and he took a lot of grief last year because he had a season that was a bit subpar, shall we say, and he struggled. He hired the mental coach, but he's went into this off season with the right mentality. He's continued to see the mental coach. He's dropped 10 pounds, and by all accounts, he is in the best condition that he's ever been in. And then according to beat writers there, he actually was winning a couple of the skating competitions. So this Anthony Mantha is a man on a mission. He has to prove to himself. He has to, that he is a viable option on the Capitals, but not even that for his long-term hockey future. If he wants to continue to get a sweater night in and night out on any NHL team, he is going to have to be in really great shape. And I ultimately think that he has what it takes. Another player to look out for is Conor McMichael. I do believe that this is going to be the year for Conor McMichael, unless something crazy happens. And again, I don't want him to be just given a job just because Spencer Carberry's here and there's a history with him. But I think that there was some reluctance with Peter Laviolette. I think that there was, some reluctance with some other people in the Capitals organization on how to properly utilize Conor McMichael. Spencer Carberry is the guy that is seen that should be working with the youth. He has a history with Conor McMichael. I thought that he deserved a look last season, a longer look. When we knew the Capitals were not going to make it to the playoffs, why didn't they give him an opportunity to shine? You see that in baseball towards the end of the season, this draft pick outfielder gets called up. The same thing goes for here. Why didn't they give Conor McMichael a longer look towards the end of the season? I guess one could say that, the Hershey Bears were making their Calder Cup, but at the end of the day, it's all about helping the big team. But putting that all aside, this has got to be the season for Conor McMichael. It's going to be interesting to see as camp starts today what kind of Conor McMichael shows up. There's going to be a lot of players that are going to be vying for those jobs. Let's face it, a lot of those players' resume look a lot better now that they won a Calder Cup. So it is going to be interesting, but it is my assessment that this will be the year, and it's time to give him a long look at the center position. And, if that means, that one of the top guys is going to have to cycle out, again, I don't want to give McMichael a job, but I want to see how he performs at the center position at a bigger role. Another player that is not too unfamiliar to Capitals players, he is a local, is Joe Snively. And Joe Snively is one of the guys that is a pleasant surprise. If we remember his long history, he played with the junior caps or whatever they were called it when he was a kid. And so he's familiar to the Washington area. And then when he was called up, it was just kind of an emergency thing. And I don't think there was any real high hopes for Joe Snively, but he has always made the most of his opportunities. If I'm going to say one thing gives Joe Snively an advantage over, let's even say, a Conor McMichael, is that when he comes up, he shines, he impresses. Some would say that Conor McMichael, the reason that he's a healthy scratch and didn't find an everyday role is that when he was in there, it wasn't consistent. One of my first interviews I did for Locked On was with JJ Regan, who covered the Capitals at the time. And he said he played well, but it wasn't sustainable. Can we get the sustainability from Conor McMichael and Joe Snively and these other players that are vying for jobs? But Joe Snively is going to be an interesting storyline to look out for. Other player to look out for is John Carlson as well. Like I said, who knows how this Capitals team would have played had John Carlson been in there. The number one defenseman in the Capitals organization, and he took that puck off the head like 90 miles per hour. And that spelled, pretty much the end of his season. I know he came back a little bit towards the end there, but you kind of start to think a little bit more and reminisce, if Wilson, Backstrom, and Carlson were there the whole time, how would Ed have done? I mean, I don't want to take anything away from him, but he was playing with a fractured skull and a severed temporal artery. So it is, a hard thing. And Ovechkin, he even spoke as much about the important role that John Carlson plays on this team. So an interesting thing for me to think about is John Carlson. How good is he? All these players are older. They're all getting older. This is the second oldest team in the NHL. Last I checked. How is this aging team going to do? How is Carlson and Ovechkin and Backstrom, this aging core, going to perform? Those are some of the things to keep an eye on. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about Martin Fehervary, a really great young blue liner for the Capitals. He faced a bunch of injuries last year and had a lot of questions about his future in the organization. A lot of those have been answered. We'll talk about him coming up. Covering my nutritional basis for the day literally couldn't be easier, which is why I trust AG1. I just mix one small scoop with water and drink it first thing each morning. Done. I also like it costs less than $3 a day. Pretty good if you ask me. It's a really effective daily habit with a high quality sourced ingredients. It is a win-win. Sometimes you don't have time to remember all these different supplements. Did I take this one? Did I take that one? All you need to take for your health is AG1. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team. Every day, make sure and subscribe and follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. Training camp is here, and I've got you guys covered. So subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals today. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about Martin Fehervary, one of the young Capitals players that actually has kind of worked his way up. He played in Hershey, and he found an everyday role on the big team, the Capitals. And how was he able to do that? What I would revere is one of the better defensemen for the Capitals to finally work his way from Hershey up to the Capitals, considering that this team has long been a team that has some reluctance to utilize its younger players. But Martin Fehervary can put a lot of things in the rearview mirror. He can put in the rearview mirror his new contract that he was concerned about. He can also worry about playing injury-free for the first time in quite some time. But just taking a look at that, his contract, Fehervary and the Capitals agreed to a 3-year contract for a total of $8 million. So a good payday for a young guy, and I think that all things considered, he deserves it. He always puts in his hard effort. I never think to myself, wow, that Martin Fehervary is just mailing it in. He always brings it. He says, I was under pressure. I tried not to think about it, the contract, but I still had it in my head. It's great to have a contract, and I'm delighted that we've reached an agreement. I love Washington, the whole club, and I can't wait to start the season. He told NHL.com/Slovakia. So it is, I got to imagine if you're a hockey player or anything, just think about your daily job and you're thinking about yourself. I'm working here today, but am I going to be here tomorrow? There are a lot of different questions. And I think if that was in the back of my mind, not having that job security as I went to my 9-to-5 job every day, like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? And where am I going to work the next day? That might weigh heavy on my mind. So to have that in the rear view has to be a pretty good feeling. But just taking a look at all the games that he missed a total of 15 games with a back, groin, and elbow issue. And one of the things that we know about Martin Fehervary is he brings the physicality for a good chunk of the season. It might have ended that way, is he led the team in hits. He was not afraid of throwing the body around. And that is one of the things I think that endears him to the Capitals, is that physical brand of hockey. The Capitals have long been known for playing a physical brand of hockey. That's where Martin Fehervary fits in that so well. But finally, to play healthy this year, to go into training camp healthy, he says, I'm much better now, and I believe it will stay that way for a while. It wasn't serious injuries, but they limited me, and I couldn't play the best I wanted to. And I think that he is the kind of guy that takes pride in what kind of product he brings to the Capitals. And I think that if he thinks that he's not bringing it 100%, I think he feels like, I'm selling myself short. I'm selling the Capital short. They're paying me a lot of money, and he holds himself accountable. When I'm not feeling well, I'm not myself. I always want to play 100%. And that is a good work ethic. And that's one of the things, I've talked about. And if you're an everydayer, is just the true maturity of these younger players. I've talked about LaPierre and McMichael, and now Martin Fehervary, that they take pride. They're not too self-centered. A lot of the things that I think the older generation generalizes the younger generation about is, they're so me-centric, and it's me first, and, they don't really care about what they're doing. Well, I'm just going to here to tell you, if the Capitals' young players are any indication, take that notion and throw it in the garbage can, because Martin Fehervary and a lot of these young Capitals players, they take a lot of pride with what kind of product they have. And one of the other pleasant things here is about Spencer Carberry in general is the rapport with the younger players. Just talking about, because Martin Fehervary and Spencer Carberry have worked together before. He says he's already coached me on the Capitals farm team in Hershey. We had a very nice conversation. He's a great coach, and I was delighted that he's coming to Washington. And when he was talking about the coaching situation and Spencer Carberry contrasting it with Laviolette, he said he's younger and he's tough on players. He demands everyone do their best on the ice. Laviolette was also a great coach, but sometimes change helps. And I think that, as we get more removed from Peter Laviolette being on the team, no one really has come out and said, pointed comments that Peter Laviolette was the problem, or he was a tough guy to be a head coach. But you're kind of starting to get that inferred, just from the different interviews that I've read and seen. You're kind of getting the feeling that maybe Peter Laviolette wasn't, the greatest coach to play under. And I think that is one of the positive things, is that Spencer Carberry holds his players accountable. He's a younger guy. He's in his 40s, so it's not like he's just their same age, but closer in age anyway. And he has that rapport because he coached a lot of them with either the Stingrays or the Capitals. So positive building blocks. And I'm looking forward to seeing the dynamic between Carberry and Fehervary and these different other players on the team. But for as far as Martin is concerned, it's going to be a great thing, because there was a lot of questions going into the offseason about the Capitals blue line. Who was going to be on there? John Carlson was the only one under contract. Alexiev was, a restricted free agent and that kind of thing. But now that the blue line has taken shape, and there's no real question marks. The only real question marks are who is going to be that seventh defenseman. I think that this is going to be a Capitals team that is going into this season for the first time in quite some time, knowing where the cards where they lay. There are going to be some players that are going to be battling for jobs, but there's no lingering injury, shall we say. There's nothing other than the Max Pacioretty thing, but he was a guy that was brought in the offseason. It seems like everything is a go. So we are going to be able to assess what this Capitals team looks like in short order. But talking about one of the significant injuries was Backstrom. He said he's a great player and a very nice person. Upon his return, it was immediate apparent that it had affected him. And as in the case of Tom Wilson back, he's a great player and a playmaker. So he is very important to us. So, just taking a look at it, you take a look at the importance of Nick Backstrom in terms of of his being an assist leader, but also the leadership qualities. A lot of the younger guys, including Tom Wilson, look up to Nick Backstrom. So it's important as you take a look at Martin Fehervary and these younger players that they have these really great mentors to look up to. I think that oftentimes when you have a rookie-laden team, that oftentimes there is a voice. It's hard to find a voice because everyone's looking around saying, well, you think you know what you're doing. You're the same age as me. And that's why they have a difficult time naming captains of teams and that kind of thing. But as far as Martin Fehervary is concerned, a pleasant surprise for me, I guess, and I don't want to really say a surprise, but I was, a little unsure when he first got called up, what kind of guy we were going to have on the blue line. But I'm here to tell you right now, I'm happy, and I'm happy that we're going to be having him go into this season. And I'm really excited about the Caps blue line and the Caps team in general and what they can bring this coming season. All right, so coming up here, we will talk about the Caps goalie depth chart. It was pretty set for quite a few years, but things have changed. How will it all shake out? I'll discuss next. Our next partner here is Bird Dogs, and let me tell you, I love me some Bird Dogs. Why? Because they're khaki shorts that make you look great. They're not those boxy cargo-style shorts, so if you have those, throw those in the garbage. You should have done that years ago. Bird Dog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. So if you're having these old shorts that you're wearing, especially guys, sometimes I don't think we don't necessarily think about fashion. Think about Bird Dogs. I have a couple pair of them. They look and feel so much better. So go to birddogs.com/lockedonnhl or enter promo code lockedonnhl at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnhl for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So talking about the goalie depth chart, something that is near and dear to my heart is I always love seeing what the Capitals have in the depth chart when it comes to goalies. And the Capitals always have a stocked pipeline when it comes to goalies. And as we know, it was Hunter Shepard and it was Fucale down in Hershey last year, and we know that Fucale got dealt out to, or he didn't get dealt, he decided to go out to the KHL to try to further his career. I think that he thought to himself, in the previous season, that I have solidified my job as the number 3 goalie for the Capitals, but then Hunter Shepard came and just kind of took the world by storm and was the MVP in the Calder Cup there. So Hunter Shepard is the number 3 goalie in the Capitals organization, but where does it go from there? It is an interesting question. I think that a lot is to be determined, but by a lot of reports, it is going to be Clay Stevenson. He played 3 games in Hershey, went 3-0-0 with a 1.96 goals against average and a .924 save percentage in 36 games with the Stingrays. He went 19-12-3 with a 2.54 goals against average and a .916 save percentage. But I don't think that you should etch that in stone. I think you should probably write that in pencil and do it with a big pencil or a big eraser rather, because there are other goalies in the organization that are going to battle him for that job. I'm talking about Mitchell Gibson. I'm talking about Garen Bjorklund. These are all guys that are fighting for that number 4 job, I guess you would say. Or I guess it could be the number 3 job, but I guess it remains to be seen. There are a lot of moving pieces, but I think that just kind of looking at the number 3, I think that is ultimately why the general consensus is Clay Stevenson. Bjorklund only played 1 professional game with Carolina, and as we know, he had a back surgery but he did not play. But then just taking a look down even a little bit further is in Antoine Keller. Antoine Keller was one of the guys that they picked in the 7th round. And I think that a lot of people were surprised that they picked another goalie in the 7th round. because there were so many options at the goaltending position. So why would you have another goalie brought in? It really seemed to defy logic. But everything that I've seen and heard from like Ross Mahoney and things like that is they were really excited about getting Antoine Keller, a French goalie. That there's something they liked about his game. Of course, we saw how he played in training camp and the rookie camp there. But, how is he going to fare in the long-term plans, being that it is a bit of a log jam at that position? It's not going to be easy for someone like Antoine Keller to work his way into the lineup. It's going to be interesting. And as you take a look at Hershey's training camp and to see how that all shakes out as well, it's going to be interesting. But for right now, it seems like Clay Stevenson is the number 3. And then the rest thereafter is a kind of a big question mark. Who's going to be playing in Carolina with the Stingrays, that kind of thing. So there's one thing that we know pretty much for sure, I guess I'm going to say, is that this is not going to be the season for Antoine Keller. I think that he most likely doesn't have plans for that yet, but I do see him playing in Hershey perhaps next year or the Stingrays. I guess it just remains to see how it shakes out, but it is exciting. If you look back historically on the Capitals, they've had a lot of great goalies that have come through here, Holtby and Grubauer and Phoenix Copley. Yeah, Phoenix Copley, he was a guy that never really found his role with the Capitals. And guess what? Went out to the Kings and killed it. So sometimes a change in zip code is just what the doctor ordered. So there's going to be a lot of interesting storylines for the Capitals in the net minding department. Of course, Darcy Kemper and Charlie Lindgren. And you go down to Hershey, Hunter Shepard, question mark, right? And then how this gets really drawn into focus for the Capitals is that we know that Darcy Kemper is a bit injury prone. So sometimes you need to draw from the talent that's down in Hershey. That's why you need a really great third goalie in the organization to call on, or fourth goalie. If Hunter Shepard gets called up, who's holding down the fort down in Hershey? So a lot of questions remain. I'll have you guys covered on Locked On Capitals, how that whole goalie battle is playing out. But it is exciting as the Capitals season and training camp is in full swing. A team that is healthy, all things considered, for the most part. They are putting their best foot forward. We know that Tom Wilson is back, who was a big piece that was missing. We know Nick Backstrom and John Carlson. They're all back in the mix as of right now. Sometimes crazy injuries happen in camp, but we're really hoping that is not going to happen. So I, for one, am excited that camp is underway and see how these different storylines play out. Is Conor McMichael going to find his job? Protas, Malenstein, Ivan Miroshnichenko. I've got you guys covered on Locked On Capitals, and I want to thank you for joining me today. And are you a fan of other DC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We have Locked On Nationals, Commanders, and Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. And now that the NHL season is starting here soon, we also have Locked On NHL. Actually, Locked On NHL goes year-round, but it's never been more important than now to check out Locked On NHL, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.